Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon and today I am back with my April and May reading wrap-up combined. I know it's a little bit late considering we're practically in the middle of June, but I asked in the last video that I put up if you would like to just wait until June and have a June reading wrap-up, and lots of you said no. If you can, please could you do your April and May, as it seems that you already like a wrap-up, so it's here as you asked. Let's get cracking. I will say, firstly, that April and May were a bit up and down with reading. April less so actually, but May certainly was, because I have been travelling loads, almost a different city every day over the last 4.5 weeks. And I thought that would mean loads of reading on the trains, on long train journeys, and loads of reading in hotels. But actually, we've been doing masses of training with libraries, and so on trains I'm either catching up with admin or just absolutely shattered, and in the hotel it's the same, just zoning out and watching a lot of telly. But some books have been read. That said, there are a few that I can't talk about and won't include in this because they are for secret bookish projects, but as soon as I can talk about them, I will. Let's get cracking on with the books though. So, first up we have The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller. I have talked about this a little bit on the channel already, as my mum and I did our, what's become kind of an annual thing I guess, chat through the Women's Prize long list and looking at which books we predicted would be on the shortlist. I predicted this would be on the shortlist and it wasn't. I predicted a riot. And I was actually, I have to say, quite disappointed because I really enjoyed this. I don't know why, but I hadn't felt like I was going to, even though I'd heard, I think it was Mercedes who really liked it. I know Jen did, but some people have really not. But I thought this was fab. It starts off after a woman called Elle. Well, we meet a woman called Elle who, the night before we meet her, has kissed and had sex. Oh, kissed and had sex. Honestly, is this like primary school? Oh, she's kissed someone. No, she's had sex with her best friend of years and years, while his wife and her husband are both in the house with her mother not far away and their kids. And what follows on from there is we go forwards in time from that moment as Elle looks at her marriage and this friendship that she's had for years, that's had this kind of, I wanted to say tingly atmosphere, that's not what I mean, tension throughout that period. And then also we go backwards to find out more about Elle, and particularly like the relationship with her mother and her mother's relationships, which I thought was brilliantly done. There is some quite dark subject matter in this, which is done in almost a flippant way, but isn't meant to be flippant to anyone who's been through that. It's just how one of the characters in particular chooses to handle it. But I thought this was fantastic. I loved the plot of going backwards and forwards, and how we just got so much. And it kind of is one of those books where you see, well, because it goes off into different people's perspectives, you get to see situations from every different perspective. And so sometimes you'll be told something in one way, but you find out there's more layers to it, or other ways that it could have been seen or misconstrued or misunderstood. And that's the sort of thing that I really like in fiction. I felt like the place was really like there. The atmosphere of the place and the sense of place was really vivid, and the theme of water running throughout I really enjoyed. Water running throughout I really enjoyed too. So yeah, I thought this was ace, and yeah, was sad not to see it on the shortlist, but still very much enjoyed it. Speaking of the shortlist, I've done a reading vlog of the Women's Prize shortlist. I'm umming and ahhing about whether I'm going to put it live on Tuesday or not, but definitely over on my mum's channel, which I'll link down below, we will be doing our shortlist in order of preference and winners predictions video. We're doing it on hers because we've done it on mine for years, and let's share the love, I say. And mum and I will be at the Women's Prize later this week. On to two poetry collections that I didn't expect to speak to each other, but did quite a lot. They're both on the Jalak long list this year, another prize that I really like, and were the two poetry collections that I hadn't read. I had read Blood Condition, and the first is Cynthia Miller's Honorifics, which I will say I think is the one that worked the most for me personally, although I enjoyed the other one very much too. But this looks at Cynthia's background as a Chinese Malaysian American woman, and what that means in terms of the culture clashes and divides and meldings and mergings, all those things, which I really, really love. That's like savage catnip, I always say. I really, really love it, where you get different cultures coming together and seeing how that works or doesn't and all those things. That's very much part of it. It's also, well, it's a poetry collection that's got loads in it. So in one way it's about that and about culture, which actually this is too. This is Like a Tree Walking by Vahni Capildeo, and this looks at Trinidad and Scottish cultures coming together. So should I talk about them together or should I talk about them separately? I'm not sure. What's banging? Sorry about that. Chris decided to start doing some DIY at 6:20 on a Sunday evening. He stopped now. Anyway, I'm going to talk about them separately, actually, because I'll get myself confused and then possibly get you confused. But as I was saying, Honorifics by Cynthia Miller, this is a collection that in a lot of ways you can't really... I don't want to say pigeonhole, or like there's not specific themes within it, apart from, like I said, where cultures come together, how they merge, how they clash, and all that kind of stuff. But also there's just so many different things. You've got some myth retellings in here. You've got a whole load of poems on jellyfish. There's some mind-blowing stuff about planets and stars and space. You've got lots of stuff in here about food, which I really, really loved. I just adored this. I also like the way it was done in quite... there's lots about colour. So yellow, particularly blue, and also indigo and violet. But also you have poems that are set up like that. So there's lots of different forms in here, which I found really interesting. A little bit challenging, which I actually really, really enjoyed. Like, for example, I wasn't sure at first how to read that one. But also I love a list, and there's quite a lot of numbered... I really love this poem, Yellow, here. There's quite a lot of numbered poems, including one that is literally a list. 30 things Sarawakians know. And I just thought, yeah, this was absolutely fantastic. Really, really loved it. And it's as good as the cover suggests. Although, interestingly, I think something with water and jellyfish and sort of space would have been a better cover than flowers, but that's just me. Anyway, then we have Like a Tree Walking, as I mentioned, by Vahni Capildeo. And this has lots of different themes in it again. It looks at culture, like I said, clashes and mergings, and I love that kind of thing. This is with Trinidad and Scotland, which is where the poet is from, the heritage that the poet has. And there's also lots of elements in here about nature, particularly birds, as you might guess from the cover. There's also, again, lots of colour in this, and weirdly yellows and blues really come to the fore. Now I have to say, sometimes I found poems a little bit confusing, like when they were all over the page like this. I wasn't quite sure how I was meant to follow them. Some it was easier actually than others. This one, for example, Stylish Deer, which I love the title of, that just threw me a little bit. But even when I wasn't quite getting what was going on in the poetry, the actual it was just beautiful to read, and the words just kind of wash over you, and they're gorgeously put together. But yeah, sometimes I didn't quite 100% get the poems, whereas I felt with this one I did. But I did think it's really interesting that there were these two poetry collections that kind of speak to each other on a lot of similar topics and themes on the same long list. And the Gillette Prize is definitely a prize that I need to kind of get on board with a lot quicker every year. There's also quite a lot of dense prose poems in here, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I didn't get everything that I wanted out of it, but I think that's more... I'm still kind of new to poetry, and this felt like... It's odd, even though some of these had more like unusual layouts and stuff, I just got them a bit more than this, which was more... I don't know, I can't quite work out. Some things work for you better than others, and this was really, really good. I just preferred the other one, personally. Then I have the pleasure of reading Companion Piece by Ali Smith. Ali Smith, I would say, is one of my favourite authors. I have to say, I feel like, how do I put this? It's not that we're parting ways or anything, but I have found the last few I have enjoyed less than her earlier works, or indeed I liked autumn. I really love winter. I wasn't so fussed on... I thought spring was all right. I didn't really like summer. And this I'm very 50-50 about. Part of me really, really loved it. It's about a woman called Sandy who gets a random phone call from somebody that she was at university with, and they only ever spoke once, but this woman's remembered her even though she's completely forgotten her, if that makes sense. And it's all about a historical artifact, and it's about immigration and borders and passports and the things that Ali Smith has looked at in her seasonal quartet, of which this is a companion piece, and feels like the fifth really, if we're honest. But it's also, I found this, so what I love about some of Ali Smith's writing is when she can do sort of the supernatural, the uncanny, the unsettling, the quirky, and it kind of really comes to life. I felt that didn't work so well in here. For example, there is a possible visitor from the past. Could it be someone from the now? We're not sure, who ends up in Sandy's house. And that whole bit I just didn't really get, wasn't really sure about or fussed about. But some of the writing in here about the pandemic and the NHS in particular, and what everyone has been through in the last few years and how awful the government in the UK is, I thought was absolutely fantastic. So it really was a book of two halves for me. I found that I wasn't really bothered about the main story. It was all the capturing the essence of what's gone on in the last couple of years that I felt were really what this book was about and where it was most pertinent and poignant. I love her wordplay so much. I love how she plays with language and how she can make certain words in there. You know, we have a thing in the UK, don't we, or in the English language, where certain words can have many meanings. And I love how she plays with that and kind of points out how ridiculous language is, but also how much fun it can be. But I just felt like the heart of it wasn't really there. So yeah, I didn't dislike it. I enjoyed reading it, but I feel like I'm missing the Ali Smith of winter, but also missing the Ali Smith of sort of before the quartet, because whilst I love the fact she is chronicling what's going on with the world, I don't know, maybe that's also a part of it. Maybe I don't want to read about that yet, although I did. In the right hands, I really enjoyed it. Like, I did think what she did, not enjoyed it, that's not the right word, but in the right hands, it's really moving and powerful, just like it was when I read Sarah Mosse writing about it, and even Sarah Hall's, all the Sarah's books to a degree. But yeah, this just sort of missed the mark a bit for me. And I feel awful saying that, because I've really, really, like I said, Ali Smith has been a favourite writer. And sometimes, very much like I was saying about this poetry collection, sometimes I don't always understand what's going on with Ali's writing, but the writing is always beautiful regardless. There was a whole thing on breaking down a poem as well, which, going back to poetry, I just felt like I was in a lesson rather than reading a book to escape into, but then book teaches things. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a bit all over the place about that one. Then, for a vlog that's going to be on Sky Arts Book Club Extra in due course, I read, or tried to read, a book a day with this year's quick read selection. So, I'm going to give you a very quick synopsis of each of these and my thoughts, because there'll be much more in that vlog. I always link the Sky Arts Book Club Facebook group down below. It's where you get extra videos and content from me over the coming, well, until Christmas at least, I think, at the moment. Anyway, first up was one that I enjoyed, probably was one of the top three that I read, and that's Kate Moss's The Black Mountain. And this is set in, I want to say Tenerife, sorry. And it's set in the 1700s when the volcano on Tenerife explodes. Oh, it's the lead up to it, sorry. And we meet one family who, this has been really divided because people politically don't want anyone to believe the volcano is going to erupt again because it caused so much chaos last time, and so it's all about denial, but also it's a gripping adventure at the same time. I absolutely love this, like literally hoovered it up. So yeah, really, really love that one. Then we have M.W. Craven's The Cutting Season, which is a grisly crime in the sort of, I really quite like a grisly crime. I'm thinking Tess Gerritsen in particular, and that sort of felt like it was, or Sharon Bolton, that sort of felt like it was in this field. But honestly, this to me was like Bants, and it really, really wound me up. The detective, I can't even remember what he's called, Washington Poe, he just was all about the banter with his workmates when there's been a murder, and I was just like, oh please. So didn't really love that one very much, so I don't think I'll be trying him out again. I enjoyed Witness by Alex Wheatle. I don't think it was necessarily sort of, I don't think I'm its audience, but it's about a young boy who is asked to basically lie in oil. He knows it's about a young boy who has to do something he disagrees with and gets involved in something with which he doesn't want to because he doesn't think it's right, but does because of gang mentality. And I thought it really shone a light on what it must be like for young people today, particularly in urban settings. But it wasn't my general cup of tea to read. But Alex Wheatle's somebody that I've meant to read for ages and would definitely read again. Then we have The Swimmer by Graham Norton. I really, really enjoyed this. This is about a woman who has moved into, and this is one thing that I really, really loved about it. This could have been way longer and I would have just lapped it all up. Laps, harsh for me. Anyway, it's about a woman who moves to the seaside after, well, to retire and just sort of embrace her life. But her sister ends up moving in as well, and they have this really awkward relationship. Like, she originally came to stay for a bit. However, she's just never left, and it's caused this kind of grudge between the two of them. However, one day, a man goes to the beach, he goes out to sea and then vanishes, and she decides that she's going, Helen, I should say, decides that she is going to investigate. And even though I knew the twist a little bit early on, or guessed the twist a little bit early on, I still really, really enjoyed this. I do think Graham Norton's a great writer. I have to say, his latest novel was not my favourite, but I've heard he's got one coming possibly this autumn, so that's exciting. Then we have Sofia Khan and the Baby Blues by Ayisha Malik. I absolutely loved Ayisha Malik's This Green and Pleasant Land, which I read because Elena raved about it, and I thought it was fantastic. I have not read any, well, I hadn't until I read this, read any of her Sofia Khan novels, of which I don't know if there's 2 or 3, but even though I now know the outcome of those, because this kind of is post both of them, or all 3 of them, I would still really like to go back because I really, really enjoyed this. It was definitely very escapist. It looks at religion and different cultures and motherhood and love in a really interesting, fantastic way for a very short book. And that is what I love about quick reads. They can be, you know, they're designed to encourage people who have not read for a while or have not picked up a book or just getting into reading in their adult life as kind of tasters before, like almost like a stepping stone to go off and read maybe longer books. Or find out what genres they like or all those kind of things. But if you are an avid reader, they're great because some of the authors that you love, it's a new book of theirs, but also they're really nice palette cleansers because I was reading other stuff between these. Then we had Blind Spot by Paula Hawkins. I love Paula Hawkins' writing. This is the one that I think felt most like it needed to be a bigger novel maybe. It's about a couple who are married who have almost like this third wheel who is a friend who they've known since they were younger. However, there's always been tension between him and I've forgotten their names, Edie, sorry, and then one of them winds up dead, so the other gets the blame and Edie is left to try and sort out what's going on. And I really like the twists and turns, but I definitely felt like this needed to be probably a novel to get even more like layers in it, but I did really, really enjoy it. And then last but not least, one that I just, wow, Santa Montefiore's The Kiss. Firstly, I actually didn't realise that was the author's name. Every time I've seen one of these books I thought it's based on like a place, but what a fabulous name. The Kiss. So this book gave me the ick massively. This is all about a man who has had an affair. Years ago it was a one-night stand. It turns out that he's had a child through this, a daughter, and she gets in touch because she's of the age that she can, and he slowly gets to know her, really, really likes her, and slowly introduces her to the family, whereupon her and one of her half brothers kind of have this tension thing. And I won't spoil what happens, but like, we don't go down the incest path, but it's so blinking close. It just made me so deeply uncomfortable. I was like, how is this meant to be a romance? It's just a bit... So, yeah, but if that's your sort of thing, give it a whirl. I mean, I read this in Italy and it is set partly in Italy, so there was that to it, but that was kind of all I could say. I mean, I did kind of not go through it love-hating it, but like, I just kind of, it blew my mind that, like, yeah, is this a kind of genre? I don't know. So we have that one. Then, speaking of Italy, while I was in Italy, I read an Italian book. I read two, actually. The first of which was The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante. I've had a bit of a tempestuous... Now, I wouldn't even say it's tempestuous, actually. I found my brilliant friend, my average friend. I thought it was okay. I didn't really love it. I read it kind of just as all the fuss was happening, like, well, over a decade ago. And then I read her latest one, the name of which completely is escaping me right now. I can see the cover. I want to say it's like The Behaviour of Adults. I don't mean that at all. I'll have written it down there, I'm sure. Unless I've forgotten, in which case you can just shout it at the screen and I'm sure I'll remember. But I didn't really like that one at all. This, however, I absolutely loved, and I think maybe Short, Sharp Eleanor is for me. So this is all about a woman whose name has now completely Leda. Leda, who is going on holiday. She's getting away from it all. She's by herself, and she sort of starts to become, well, not sort of, she does become quite obsessed by a mother and daughter who are on holiday with their family. And as this obsession sort of blooms or blossoms or develops, or all the other words that I could use that basically are blooms, it looks at her relationship with her children and what happened with her daughters, and it just gets darker and darker. It's a really short, sharp, spiky book, and I really, really, really loved that. So yeah, I was just like hooked. I think it looks at motherhood in a fascinating way. It looks at well, yeah, it just looks at motherhood in a really, really fascinating way. I don't want to give anything away if you've not read it. I also watched the film with Olivia Colman, which I thought was good, but not as good as the book, even though Olivia Colman is queen, in some cases, quite literally, or has been in some shows. So yeah, I thought this was really, really good, and I have now got both of Elena Ferrante's other two short novellas, and I'm going to be heading to them in due course, because I really thought that was fantastic. A book that I loved so much, it was one of two in my last video that I talked about, where I talked about two new favourite to me books. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And that is Blue Hour. I will link that video down below, so if you want to go and hear me whine on about it all the more, you can. But this is about, it starts off with Eleanor, who is leaving her partner with her daughter. They're driving away. She's constantly looking over her shoulder to see if she's being followed. That's in the 1970s. And then we go back to the war, where we meet Kitty, who has fallen in love with a man who's going to go to war. And when he comes back from war, they are reunited when she is a nurse at a psychiatric hospital, and he has come back both physically and mentally changed forever by the war and has really bad PTSD. And we follow their marriage, whilst also we follow Eleanor going back on how she got into the relationship she did, and we soon realise that Kitty is Eleanor's mother. So it's another book very much about mothers and daughters, and it's dark, it's twisted. I winced through quite a lot of it, and there was one section where I was like, whoa, no. But I thought it was utterly brilliant. It's so beautifully written. Nature and atmosphere and landscape in this book are hugely important. But yeah, I just thought it looked at trauma and grief, and how we can become villainous in a really, really powerful, visceral, unsettling, uncomfortable way. But I think that's the whole point of the book, and I'm a big believer that fiction should be uncomfortable sometimes, because we can experience from the comfort of our sofas or beds or baths or wherever we choose to read. So yeah, I thought this was absolutely brilliant. Then a book that was a bit more hit and miss for me. I bought this in Rome when I was there in April. First Execution by Domenico Starnone. I wanted to read this because of Renee over at So I Read This Book, who is a huge stan of Starnone. But I think actually I probably should have started with later books. I think it's Ties, and there's another one, I want to say it's called Trust or Trist. But yeah, I should have probably headed to this one. But this was the only one that was available when I was in Rome, and I had a real urge to read his writing. I was thrilled though, because it is a signed edition, which is really cool, and I got it in Other Stories, which is now one of my favourite bookshops in the world. But this is all about a professor who, one of his students has been arrested for something to do with terrorism, and when she's released, she comes to find him because she wants him to finish what she started, because she's being watched. But then we soon learn that this professor, funnily enough, called Domenico, we then step back and realise that it's a novel that's being written by a Domenico, and then it all gets really meta, and that's sort of where the power fizzled, deflated, whatever word I want to stick in there. Yeah, that's where that went a little bit awry for me. I still really enjoyed it. I wouldn't have picked it up otherwise. And I would definitely go to some of his other writing, but I think this one was just a bit, when I was on holiday and was wanting to read something that was just a bit more, he says, you read that on holiday, and that was quite a time. But yeah, this just, I think occasionally got a bit too meta for its own good, but I still enjoyed it. I thought what it was saying was really interesting, and yeah, there we go. There's that. I'll definitely read more of his. I read the next in the Simon Sorella series by Susan Hill, A Question of Identity, which I can't remember if this is the 7th or the 8th. I feel like it's the 7th, but I'm trying to play catch up with this. Simon Sorella series is set in the made-up cathedral city of Lafferton, and as you read the series, you get to know more about Simon and his life, and also his family's life, as well as crimes that Simon ends up working on. I feel like I've said Simon a lot there. Simon says Simon. And this, so the last one I read ended on a cliffhanger, which this one kind of dealt with quite early and just battered off, which I was a bit disappointed by. It also killed off a character from the last one very quickly, and again, I felt slightly dissatisfied by that. But the crime element I thought was quite interesting. It was quite gruesome, more gruesome than a lot of Susan Hill's that I have read. It's set in a sort of, I want to say old people's home, but actually what I mean is retirement village, or what are they called, where you can go and live in this kind of care on site. But it's in Duchess of Devonshire Close, and somebody is killing old women there who are vulnerable and alone, and it looks at a case that happened decades before in Yorkshire where the same thing was happening, so you know the two are linked, and then we follow along. And it felt like it didn't really get started until the end of the first quarter, or maybe actually even halfway through, and then I don't like crimes where nobody dies for ages, and that's where I had a real problem with this series to begin with, because that happened in the first one. I mean, we were talking like 150, 200 pages in out of like a 500 page book, and then and then the second one I got really cross because it's unresolved, which I think is unforgivable in crime. But then I really got into the swing of it, and I do think it is getting to know Simon and his family and all the domestic dramas that are going on with the crime in the background that makes this series really, really fab to read. So yeah, Susan Hill, interesting character, writes interesting characters. There we go, that's what I'll say. And then we have, I think this is May, the first of 3 whole books I read in May, and that is Just by Looking at Him by Ryan O'Connell. There are other books that I read in May, but I can't talk about them yet for various different reasons. But this was for a event that I hosted with Ryan. I'll link that down below. I think you've got another like 4 days to watch it if you want to. I will say I think it's probably the queerest, naughtiest, funnest interview I have ever done, and that's because this book, those of you who've been watching for a while may remember, led me to say penis more than I've ever said penis on this channel in my life. But I'm going to hold up the American edition because I love this cover, and they've gone with a pink and a yellow version of this one as the finished one in the UK, and I actually think this one would have been better. This is the proof, but I just love this American edition so blinking much. So this is all about Elliot, who is from, you would imagine he's kind of got it all really. He is with his partner Gus, who has the perfect penis. There we go, I've said penis again. Oh, and again. He is working in TV. Admittedly, he's quite frustrated with that. He's got an awful boss. But but it's at a point where Elliot has just like decided that, is the perfect penis enough? Do you not need more in a relationship? And he ends up meeting a sex worker that he hears about through his boss, River, and has this kind of, it opens him up in all sorts of ways, because this book is very graphic, which I really, really enjoyed. But it opens Elliot up and also sort of begins his unravelling. And what also is kind of a problem in Elliot and Gus's relationship is that Elliot has cerebral palsy, and his partner Gus kind of panders him and pampers him and looks after him, which on one hand Elliot loves but also doesn't, and is there kind of a fetishizing element to it. And it looks at queerness, but it also looks at disability within the queer community and disability within the community, well, the greater community, and how often your disability can make you invisible, not because you're not visible, but because people just kind of block it, and not in a, oh, I don't see it kind of way, just in a, I don't want to see it kind of way. And I thought that was all brilliant. Someone with chronic illness, I don't feel like it's the same level for me, but the awkward conversations that I have had awkward conversations about, and also some of the queer concepts in here, I really, really kind of chimed with, and I just thought it was brilliant. And I think some of the writing in this is so beautiful, and Ryan has a lot to say on invisibility that I think is really, really important. And what he's done, I think, brilliantly is to write about that in a very frank, direct, honest way. And also, life is all sort of, life can be hard and traumatic, but also there can be joy and laughter and comedy in there, and he really uses comedy in a powerful way, as some incredible sex scenes. So yeah, if you've not got to it yet, get your mitts on it. It's great, perfect summer read. Then I read Heaven, which, heaven knows, I think put me in quite a book funk. This book took me ages, and it is a short book. It might be, like I said, because I've been travelling a lot, my brain's a little bit all over the place, as you may tell from this video. But I just, So, Heaven, by Mieko Kawakami, which is translated by, why doesn't it say on the cover, or like even early on, translated from the Japanese by Sam Bett and David Boyd. And actually this is a signed copy that I think I got in Portsmouth, I want to say, the bookshop in Portsmouth, ages ago, last year. Anyway, I've been meaning to read it for ages, and it says signed on the cover, so I didn't need to show you the signatures. That was just frankly showing off. But this is about a young man who is being horrifically bullied at school because he looks a little different. He has one eye that isn't functioning properly. And so he is bullied hugely for that, but also partly because, as we discover, the bullies just believe he's not doing anything about it, so he should be bullied. He then meets, what's the name of the character? I'm dreadful with names at the moment. Kojima, who is a young girl, in the same class as him, and is being horrifically bullied by her female counterparts. And it's how they start to write to each other and this friendship forms. I thought the writing on bullying was brilliantly done. It's so visceral, and as someone who was bullied horrifically at school, I will say I think that's one of the reasons the book took me a long time to read, because I kept having to pause from it because it was making me think about that time, and that was really uncomfortable, but incredibly powerful and poignant and true to life. I mean, I never got my head used as a basketball, but yeah, I mean, there is some horrific scenes in this, but I just felt it lost its way for me. I've heard that Breasts and Eggs, which was Miko's debut or first book published in English here, I heard that sort of falls apart in the second half, but that's a much bigger book. This, I just felt like it was all shock, and yet the reasoning behind it almost felt a bit voyeuristic, because I didn't feel there was enough depth to it, and into like sort of how it, I don't know, it just lacked depth, and I just struggled with that, because yeah, like I said, it just, as I mentioned, I don't mind books being uncomfortable, but I don't want it to be uncomfortable just for uncomfortable sake, or just there's got to be a reason behind it. That's where fiction can be so powerful, because it makes you uncomfortable. It makes you think about why you're uncomfortable, or what the reasons behind how different people behave. And I think when we get to a point where there's a conversation between the bullies and the bullied, it just lacked depth. I've said that a few times now. So yeah, I also felt like it wanted almost to be a longer book. Like there's a whole point where they go to an art gallery and they discuss heaven, and that was all discussed, but it didn't feel like it sort of went anywhere. And I didn't not like it. I'm glad I've read it, if that's the right term for a book that did make me feel so uncomfortable and make me think back to things I didn't want to think about. But I just kind of came away from it thinking like, but why? Like, what were you trying to say? What are you trying to make? What do I need to go away and think about? What? And I do think there needs to be a what behind some books. And this felt like one of those books where there was a what behind it. I just couldn't work out what the what was. So there we go. And then last but not least is The Promise by Damon Galgut, which I read as I had the pleasure of interviewing Damon for, again, Sky Arts Book Club Extra. And that'll be going live in a couple of weeks. I wasn't excited about reading this book, I have to be honest, because I'd heard kind of like sort of meh things about it. And I absolutely bloody loved it. So much so, it's the other book out of the two, so this and Sarah Schmidt, that I talk about in two new favourite books, in a two new favourite books video, which is my previous video, which, like I said, I'll link down below. Wow. This is why I don't do wrap-ups, because I just don't think I'm necessarily very good at them. I just go off on too many tangents. Anyway, this is in part about siblings. We have Anton, Astrid and Amor, and it starts at the death of their mother. And it's how Amor has heard a conversation before her mother died between her mother and her father, where they promised that they would give the servant who was working in their house her house after her mother's death, and that doesn't happen. So it's this promise that isn't fulfilled. And then what we do is we follow the family through another 3 funerals. So the book is made up of 4 funerals and 4 deaths. It looks at grief and death in a very frank, honest, very emotional, but also incredibly funny way. Some of this book really made me laugh out loud. It has this kind of omnipresent narrator, so you sort of pass through various different characters so that you get like a real 360 degree perception of everything that's going on, both from people who you empathise with, some who you're really on board with, some who you think are heinous, and some who you just totally disagree with, and yet you follow them on. And it looks at trauma, it looks at sibling relationships, which I really love in fiction, and also at the same time, whilst all this is going on, you've got over these 4 different funerals which happen over different decades, the sort of history of what's going on in South Africa at the time. I will say it's done in this kind of it's very peripheral, because the focus is very much on the family drama and dynamics, not on the bigger situation. It's sort of book where you have to go and fill in the gaps, not only just where the gaps are between the last time you saw the family just before the next funeral, when you switch between the different parts, but also you have to go and kind of, there are enough little sort of snippets that you can go off and find out more about what was going on in South Africa at these different points, or what has gone on in South Africa. And I thought that was brilliant. But I've seen lots of people being really disappointed that they think it's a book about South Africa that isn't enough about South Africa, but that's not what the book is about. It's about a family and death and grief within that family, and a promise that isn't kept, that happens to be in South Africa, and South Africa therefore affects it in some ways and not others, because like I said, the main drama is about what's going on with the family. I like the fact that there was magical elements, ghostly elements. I thought it had a great sense of humour. I couldn't put it down. I raced through it. I thought it was fantastic. It got me out of a book funk, which I might have started. So there we go. Those are the books that I read in April and May. I think that's going to have been quite a long video. So you asked for it. you got it. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't feel I'm very good at them anymore, but there we go. I will definitely try and do one again in June. Maybe it's just when you get a bit rusty or something, a bit like not filming as often. That's also not helping probably. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on any of those books if you have read them too, and I will see you in another video whenever I see you. Bye.